My name is Olivia. At 31, I was sure my life was on track, but just one conversation changed absolutely everything. My parents gave me a very harsh ultimatum: either I cover all the expenses for my sister Haley's lavish wedding, or our paths would part forever. What was most astonishing was that these words were spoken within the walls of my own home, the one I paid for, and which had served as their reliable shelter for the last 3 years. Across from me sat Haley, a triumphant smile playing on her face, the very one I knew so well. It always appeared when my sister got what she wanted, leaving me with nothing. By the way, write in the comments what city you're watching this video from. And if you know the feeling of your loved ones seeming to stop seeing you as a person, support this story with a like and a subscription. Because what I said to them set off a whole chain of events, the finale of which will definitely surprise you. To give you some context, this whole story began 3 years ago. My father had lost his position at a major financial company, and my parents asked to live with me. They assured me it would only be for a couple of months, until things got back on track. But their couple of months stretched into years, turning into an endless renovation with no end in sight. They moved in with almost nothing, just a couple of bags, but somehow, within a week, my living room was filled with their bulky old furniture, completely changing the look of my home. My mother immediately took to reorganizing my kitchen, declaring without appeal, "Honey, this will be much more practical," and moving everything to her liking. My father set up an office for himself in my office, supposedly for an active job search. In reality, his searches boiled down to hours of watching videos about classic car restoration on YouTube. And just so you understand the whole picture, I've been working tirelessly since I was a teenager. I fought my way through college and law school, juggling 3 jobs with my studies, and came out with a degree and substantial student debt. For the last 6 years, I have literally built my law practice brick by brick. 2 years ago, upon receiving a senior associate position, I naively thought I had finally found solid ground under my feet. How wrong I was. The first warning bell, which I ignored at the time, rang when the master bedroom in my house was given to Haley. Yes, you heard that right, my own bedroom was given to my sister. "She just has so many things, she needs the space," my mother said casually, as if it were a matter of course, while I stood bewildered in the hallway with my clothes in my hands. I ended up being moved into the tiny guest room, onto a narrow bed I had once bought for friends. I'm a lawyer, I know how to adapt, I tried to convince myself. I can handle this. But it was just another lie I told myself. Almost immediately, my expenses began to spiral out of control. The electricity bills tripled because the house was kept at a perfect temperature year-round. The food budget was bursting at the seams. My father suddenly became a fan of exclusively organic products, and my mother fancied herself the chef of an elite restaurant. When I once tried to delicately bring up the rising costs, my mother just condescendingly patted my hand and said, "Honey, that's what family is for, to support each other. You understand that, right?" Oh, I understood everything perfectly. I realized I had become their convenient retirement plan, and in return, I was given the role of a servant in my own home. My sister Haley could forget her clothes in the washing machine for days, and then complain to me when I finally took her things out. My father would take my car without thinking to ask for permission, and invariably return it with a nearly empty tank. And when I tried to establish at least some basic rules, my parents would exchange meaningful glances. "I'm sure you know that look." It said without words, "Oh, poor Olivia, she's making things complicated again." My patience had been wearing thin for months, drop by drop. With each passing day, I felt more and more like a stranger in the house I paid for. This feeling intensified every time I paid the doubled bills, realizing that almost nothing was left of my own savings. Or when one of them carelessly threw out the phrase, "our house," referring to my, and only my, property. But I was raised with the idea that family is sacred. That those who have achieved success are obliged to help their loved ones. And that any doubt about the correctness of family values is a manifestation of pure egoism. But what finally pulled the rug out from under me, I found out last month. It turned out that behind my back, my parents had been telling all our acquaintances a heart-wrenching story about how I was in serious financial trouble, and they had moved in with me to support their daughter. So, it was they, apparently, who were helping me. This news came to me from my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, who remarked with sincere sympathy in her voice, "How noble of your parents to be there for you during such a difficult time." At that moment, I was sure my morning coffee was going to go down the wrong way. I barely managed to choke out, "I beg your pardon?" I slowly put my fork down on the plate. Something inside me snapped, and a cold, lawyerly voice replaced my emotions in my head. It clearly dictated a plan: keep your composure. Get all the details. And under no circumstances show your true intentions until the right moment. So, about the wedding, my mother began with a casual air, helping herself to more turkey, as if she were discussing the weather forecast and not the financing of my sister's dream. "We've estimated that a sum of $30,000 should cover all the expenses: the venue rental, decor, dress, photographer's services." With pride, she added, "Haley has already found a simply gorgeous place in the heart of Sonoma Valley." Of course, Sonoma Valley, I thought. Any other place in our city would be too simple for our Princess Haley. I shifted my gaze to my sister. She was studying her phone with exaggerated interest, feigning complete indifference to the fact that the fate of her luxurious future was being decided right here, at my table and, obviously, at my expense. $30,000 is a very substantial amount, I said slowly, choosing my words carefully. "Consider it an investment in the family's future," my father countered. And I could swear his voice had the same persuasive tones as 3 years ago when he was convincing me to let them stay for just a couple of months. "Haley is only getting married once," he added. "And we simply must do everything top-notch." Once, I scoffed mentally. Actually, this was her third attempt. The previous 2 engagements were broken off because Haley concluded that her fiancés were not ambitious enough. But who's keeping track of such trivialities, right? Certainly not my parents. The same ones who, without a second thought, spent the money saved for my college on her year-long trip to Europe, while I was working 3 jobs just to be able to study. For the last few weeks, an unpleasant feeling had been growing in me that there was some kind of rot at the very core of our family relationships. Thanks to 6 months of therapy, I began to notice what I had previously turned a blind eye to: any conversation inevitably revolved around Haley's desires and problems. My own successes were awarded only a fleeting nod, after which the attention immediately shifted back to the latest drama in her life. Therapy was helping me to break the habit of putting others' interests above my own, and the process was painful. Gathering my courage, I asked the question that became my first attempt to set boundaries: "Has it ever occurred to you that Haley and Liam could perhaps pay for their own wedding? As most adults do." The air in the room instantly grew cold. The smile on my mother's face immediately faded, becoming strained and cold. "Olivia, that's selfish," she clipped out. "Liam just finished his medical residency, he has huge student debts. They're just starting their journey." Just starting their journey, I repeated mentally. What irony. Liam's family owned almost half of the prime real estate in Palo Alto, but my parents, apparently, liked to imagine him as some poor student. While my own start had already lasted 15 years, and all this time I had been single-handedly supporting their standard of living. I decided to try another angle. What if I just don't have that kind of money? $30,000 is literally everything I've saved for a rainy day. Then you'll find a way, my father cut in, stabbing his knife into his steak with excessive force. That's why you're a successful person, Olivia. Successful people always find a solution when it comes to family. Successful people, a bitter smile touched my lips. I clearly remembered how 3 years ago this very successful person was unemployed and on the verge of being evicted, and it was his daughter who saved him then. But in our family, it seemed, everyone had a very short memory when it was convenient. Haley finally slowly looked up from her phone screen. "Well, what else are you going to spend it on?" she asked with that same slight smirk that had been getting on my nerves since we were kids. "Think about it, you're not dating anyone, you don't go anywhere, all you do is work. This way, at least you'll invest in something truly important." Something important, echoed in my head. 15 years of work, 6 years of building a career from scratch, a life of strict economy. And all of this so that 3 adults could live in comfort, seeing me as nothing more than a wallet. And after all that, my sister declares that my life is meaningless. At that moment, I clearly remembered the words of my therapist, Dr. Evans. She had seemingly foreseen this scene. Olivia, when you start setting personal boundaries, those who are comfortable with their absence will put up fierce resistance. Ultimatums, guilt, any kind of manipulation will be used, anything to restore the order of things that is familiar to them. Dr. Evans's words gave me strength. I looked up and asked quietly but firmly. And what happens if I refuse? The silence that hung in the room after my question was almost palpable. My parents exchanged that signature look, a silent signal I had seen dozens of times. It always preceded the making of another family decision, in which my opinion, by tradition, had no place. My father coughed loudly, and the sound echoed in the silence as if a judge were preparing to announce his verdict. Olivia, you're putting us in a difficult position, he began with a hint of sadness in his voice. A family should support each other. And if you're not ready to help at a time like this, then our paths, unfortunately, will have to part forever. Don't talk like that, my mother gently stopped him, then turned to me with all her feigned concern. Olivia is just very tired. But she understands how important this day is for Haley. You wouldn't refuse your sister, would you, dear? It's such a special occasion. A special occasion, that phrase became the key that unlocked a door to the past. My childhood immediately came to mind, a time when I was made to understand my true place every day. I remembered my college graduation, an important, once-in-a-lifetime, event that they missed for Haley's dance recital. I remembered countless birthdays, holidays, and personal victories that were invariably pushed to the background because my sister was having another tragedy, or another great event was planned. My gaze swept across the room, at the people who had shamelessly invaded my life, demanding that I pay for their dreams, while my own were just an annoying nuisance to them. They sat at my dark walnut table, an object of my pride, for which I had saved money for almost a year. The light from the large panoramic windows, installed last summer, fell on their faces, frozen in tense anticipation. And at that moment, like a saving beacon, Dr. Evans's words echoed in my head. You have no control over other people's reactions to your boundaries, Olivia. The only thing you can control is your own determination to uphold them. This gave me strength. I need time to think about it, I said in a steady voice. Think? What is there to think about? Haley's voice took on those same petulant notes that had worked flawlessly on our parents since she was an infant. It's simple, Olivia. Either family means something to you, or it doesn't. Either you want my happiness, or you're just jealous that, unlike you, I've found my love. Jealous. Of course. That was their trump card, which they pulled out every time I dared to want something for myself. By their logic, I was jealous when Haley got the better room. Jealous when she got an expensive computer for her 16th birthday, and I got the need to find a part-time job. Jealous when they paid for her education while I was drowning in student debt. I shook my head and quietly replied, it's not about jealousy. I'm just very tired. Tired of what? My father asked with emphasis. Of having a loving family? Of people who did everything for you? His last words were the trigger. All the months of work with Dr. Evans, all the conclusions and realizations, all of it poured out into a single, calm question. I looked him straight in the eye and asked. And what exactly did you do for me? A deafening silence filled the room. I could see by their bewildered faces how they were desperately trying to find at least one example in their memories, but in vain. Because the truth was simple, in this family, I had always been the only one doing anything. I was the one who gave up meeting friends for extra hours at the office. I was the one who couldn't build a normal relationship because I was constantly thinking about bills. I was the one who lost my own peace of mind to provide them with comfort. We gave you a roof over your head, my mother said uncertainly after a long pause. I slowly, deliberately repeated after her, you gave me a roof over your head? In my own house, which I fully support. Oh, don't be dramatic, Haley interjected, rolling her eyes theatrically. To hear you talk, you'd think we're some unbearable burden. You know, there are those moments of absolute clarity when the veil suddenly lifts from your eyes. You feel as if you've woken up and are horrified to realize how long you've been wandering in a fog. That's exactly what happened to me that evening. I sat at my table and listened as my closest relatives seriously tried to convince me that everything I had earned rightfully belonged to them. Dr. Evans had warned me that something like this would happen. But it's one thing to discuss a hypothetical situation in the quiet of an office, and quite another to find yourself in the epicenter of events. I repeat, I need time, I said firmly. And how much time do you need? There was a steely note in my mother's voice. We need to make a deposit for the rental, time is running out. I will announce my decision tomorrow, I replied and began to clear the plates. This simple action, which I had performed thousands of times, suddenly seemed completely alien, mechanical. I need to weigh everything. But deep down, I had already made up my mind. That night, sleep never came. As soon as I closed my eyes, Haley's smirk would immediately appear before my mind's eye, and my father's ultimatum would echo in my ears. At 6 a.m., I gave up my futile attempts to sleep, got up, and decided to make myself a cappuccino. I stood in my kitchen, watching the first rays of sunlight break through the panoramic windows, and did something I had never done before. I dialed Dr. Evans's emergency line. Olivia, her voice on the phone was, as always, calm and steady. What happened? I recounted everything to her, the dinner, the ultimatum, the demand for $30,000. And with every word I spoke, I felt my voice transform from uncertain to firm and resolute. What are you feeling right at this moment? She asked gently. I feel a strong sense of outrage, I answered without hesitation. But along with it, an incredible freedom. As if for the first time, I'm seeing the whole picture clearly, without distortion. And what do you see? Extremely unfair treatment. Constant pressure and manipulation. And a family for whom I was never a daughter, but only a source of income. Dr. Evans paused, letting those words hang in the silence. Then she asked, and what do you want now, Olivia? The answer came instantly. I want them to move out. Then you know what to do, she concluded quietly. I decided to devote the morning not to work, but to developing a clear plan of action. My inner lawyer coolly analyzed the legal aspects, confirming that the law was on my side. I made a few calls, one to have new locks installed on the house the next day, another to check prices in case they needed help with the move. I thought through every step, leaving no room for doubt. When the clock struck 8, I resolutely walked to my father's room. My knock irritated him. He opened the door, wrapping himself in a robe and not hiding his annoyance. I want to discuss something, I said. What now? He snapped. The fact that today is your last day in this house. A whole gamut of emotions played across his face, from shock to indignation, which eventually gave way to mocking disbelief. Is this some kind of stupid joke? I'm giving you 24 hours to pack your things and move out. My voice was even and cold. Olivia, come to your senses, we're family. Family doesn't turn their daughter into their personal bank account, I retorted. The noise attracted my mother, who came into the hallway with an expression of universal sorrow on her face. Olivia, what are you doing? I calmly repeated my demand to her. Just then, Haley appeared in the doorway, her words full of accusation. I knew it. You just can't stand my happiness and found an excuse to ruin everything. My decision has nothing to do with the wedding, I explained calmly. It was just the last straw. I'm asking you to move out because for the last 3 years you have been living at my expense and acting as if I were your servant. My patience has simply run out. And where are we supposed to go, in your opinion? There was bewilderment in my mother's voice. From this moment on, that has ceased to be my problem, I replied. You are adults. I'm sure you'll figure something out. You have no right. Haley exclaimed. We live here. My inner lawyer smirked. I knew exactly what rights they had. On the contrary, Haley. I have every right. And I am exercising it right now. My father took a step toward me, his face turning purple with rage. Think carefully, Olivia. There will be no going back after this. You're putting money before your family. You're mistaken. My voice was quiet but firm. It was you who put money before me the very day you decided that my wallet was your property. I can't believe this is happening. Haley exclaimed, her voice beginning to tremble. You're turning your back on your family because of some pieces of paper. I'm not turning my back. I'm saving myself from those who took my kindness for granted for 3 years. Kindness, my father snorted. Don't forget, we raised you for 18 years, fed you, and clothed you. And I fully supported you for 3 years, I retorted. Consider that I've repaid my debt with interest. Seeing that pressure wasn't working, my mother changed tactics. Honey, we understand, you're just not yourself because of this wedding. Her voice became cloying and soft. Let's not rush things, we can find a solution that works for everyone. I cut off her soft, coaxing tone. Mom, this hasn't been about the wedding for a long time. It's about basic respect, personal boundaries, and fairness. I'm saying this completely calmly, I added, feeling my voice become as firm as it did in a courtroom. For 3 years, I have single-handedly supported 3 able-bodied people who, in return, acted as if I and my opinion simply didn't exist in this house. That's not true, my mother tried to object. Not true? Then answer me a few questions, I switched to an interrogation tone. When did any of you ever ask how my day was? When was the last time you remembered that I work 60 hours a week so that you can all live in comfort? And when did you stop perceiving this house as mine and start considering it your own property? The answer was a resounding silence, which said more than any words. I repeated my ultimatum, 24 hours. Tomorrow evening, there will be new locks here. And what will you do if we just don't leave? There was a challenge in my father's voice. Then I will have to call the police and report a trespass on private property, I answered, looking him straight in the eye. I was no longer arguing. I was simply stating a fact. Then Haley resorted to her last argument, tears. This time, they seemed genuine. Olivia, please, her voice trembled. I'm getting married soon. This is supposed to be a happy time. For a moment, I again felt a pang of guilt and the desire to fix everything. But then Dr. Evans's words echoed in my head, you can't give away everything you have to make others comfortable. This thought gave me strength. Haley, I sincerely wish you happiness and a beautiful wedding, I said. But this wedding will not be paid for with my savings. But Liam and his parents. They're expecting a beautiful celebration, she exclaimed. They have such status. What will they think of us if we can't arrange everything properly? And then I understood everything. I understood her main fear. She was afraid. Afraid of not looking like an equal to his wealthy parents, and she wanted me to relieve her of that fear. In that case, why doesn't Liam's family cover the expenses? I suggested logically. They're not obligated to do that. She blurted out. I looked at her and asked one last question, and am I? To that, Haley had no answer. For the rest of the day, I was a silent observer of their commotion. There were endless calls to distant relatives, browsing of rental websites, and, of course, loud arguments in which they shifted the blame onto each other. Funnily enough, I never once heard even a hint of the idea that they themselves might be the cause of this situation. Toward evening, Liam's car appeared in the driveway. I watched from the window as Haley, sobbing theatrically, threw herself into his arms. Their conversation on the porch lasted no more than 30 minutes, after which Liam left looking confused and puzzled. Haley entered the house with red eyes, but there was a new confidence in her gaze. Good news, she announced, as if she had found a brilliant solution. Liam said we can postpone the wedding for a couple of months. And he'll try to persuade his parents to help us with the money. Well, I'm happy for you, I replied evenly. So the matter is closed. No, it's not closed. She retorted. You still want us to leave. That's right, I confirmed. But I don't understand why. We found a solution. The wedding is going to happen. I looked at her with genuine surprise. She really didn't understand. Haley, I said, trying to speak as calmly as possible, understand, it was never just about the wedding. The next 24 hours turned into a veritable storm of calls and messages. My phone was blowing up with numbers I hadn't seen in years, and they all asked the same question: how can you do this to your family? My Aunt Carol called repeatedly, and Uncle Mike sent me a whole lecture on the importance of family ties. The culmination was a call from my grandfather, a man I respected immensely. The whole family is buzzing that you kicked them out over wedding money, he began gently. Grandpa, that's, to put it mildly, not the whole truth, I sighed. And what is the whole truth? He asked calmly. And I told him. Everything, about the 3 years of living at my expense, the constantly rising bills, the refusal to contribute to household expenses, and the final demand that was the last straw. When I finished, he was silent for a long time. So that's it, granddaughter, he finally said. I couldn't have imagined such a thing. Few could, I replied. They're masters at putting themselves in a favorable light. Their demands were unfair, he said firmly. And I'm proud that you had the strength to say no. His words of support were like a breath of fresh air to me. My grandfather, the head of our family, was the only one who saw the truth. But my parents and Haley continued to try to persuade me, each in their own way. My father appealed to logic, reminding me how difficult it is to find a job at his age. My mother tried to evoke sympathy, talking about what my late grandmother would have felt in such a situation. And Haley alternated between emotional reproaches and tearful pleas. And again, for the umpteenth time, my mother's question sounded, but where will we go? I patiently listed the options. You can rent an apartment, there are hotels with monthly rates, you can turn to other relatives. I'm sure a solution will be found. But with what funds? She persisted. Dad can get a job, you can too, and so can Haley. It's not such a complicated idea. You're just heartless, Haley threw at me. I'm looking at things realistically, I corrected her. You are 3 adults who have simply gotten used to me solving all your problems. But that's over. The ultimatum expired at exactly 6 in the evening. When I returned home, the scene was depressing. They were sitting in the living room, surrounded by packed suitcases, looking completely bewildered. We need a little more time, my father began. You were given 3 years, I answered quietly. At least a couple more days. We've almost found an option. My answer is no. I picked up my phone. What are you going to do? Fear sounded in my mother's voice. I will have to report that there are strangers in my house, I said, looking at the phone screen and not at them. You wouldn't dare, Haley whispered. Please don't make me do this. My father said firmly, no need. We're leaving. Their packing took another couple of hours. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea and just watched, feeling not pain or drama inside, but a surprising calm. Instead of the expected heaviness in my heart, I felt a huge, years-long burden fall from my shoulders. My mother was the last to leave. She lingered on the threshold. I hope you're happy now, she threw out quietly. I looked at her and replied just as quietly, I hope I will be. When the door closed behind them, I slowly walked around my house for the first time in 3 years. The silence that greeted me was simply delightful. It was my space again. My territory. My peace. That evening, I made myself a light dinner and ate it in silence. I put on a movie I had long wanted to watch, without arguing with anyone over the remote. I went to bed knowing that I wouldn't be woken up in the night by another, urgent problem. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt that I could finally breathe freely. The next morning, my phone started ringing off the hook. It was the last attempt to turn everything back. Haley was crying and begging for another chance. My mother was convincing me that I was making the biggest mistake of my life. My father went from reproaches to attempts to appeal to my conscience. I listened to their messages on the answering machine and, without calling back, simply deleted them one by one. Returning to work was a real relief. Clear tasks, business meetings, clients, all of it was so simple and logical compared to the chaos at home. My colleague Ava noticed a change in me over lunch. "You seem to be glowing from the inside," she said. "I feel like I've dropped a heavy backpack," I smiled. "I'm happy for you. Sometimes relationships with loved ones can be very difficult." And she was absolutely right. For the last 3 years, I had tried so hard to please everyone that I had completely forgotten how to be happy myself. But, as it turned out, it was only the calm before a new storm. In the evening, I got a call from Liam. He spoke very carefully, choosing his words like a true diplomat. "Olivia, I heard you're going through a difficult time in your family." I didn't beat around the bush and asked directly, "They're with you now, right?" "Yes, but it's only for a while, until they find a place," he confirmed. For a moment, I felt sorry for him. He had no idea what he had gotten himself into. "Liam, if you'll allow me, I'll give you a piece of friendly advice," I said. "Discuss with them very clearly what exactly 'for a while' means. Otherwise, you risk finding yourself in my shoes in 3 years. Haley said you just can't accept her success," he said cautiously. The word "success" sounded so ridiculous that I barely suppressed a chuckle. "Her success? Please explain what you mean." "Well, her engagement, the fact that she's happy, building her life." "Liam," I interrupted him gently, "Haley is 27 years old. In her entire life, she hasn't held a single job for more than 3 months. For the last 3 years, she has lived entirely on my money. Tell me, please, which part of this story looks like success?" A long, meaningful silence hung on the other end of the line. It told me more than any words. "She said you were helping them of your own free will," he finally said uncertainly. "And did she forget to mention that my will was never asked for? Or that this help cost me my bedroom, my office, and almost my entire income?" "No. She didn't mention that," he answered quietly. "Then just ask yourself one question, Liam. If Haley is really as successful and self-sufficient as she wants to appear, why did she need her sister's money for the wedding?" When the conversation ended, I felt a strange combination of sadness and lightness. I was sad that they had dragged another person into their games. And at the same time, I felt relieved because now it wasn't my battle. Over the next few days, a whole wave of calls came from people my parents had turned against me. Family friends called to tell me how disappointed they were in me. The story even reached my manicurist, who also felt the need to give me some advice. "Family is the most important thing, honey," she said instructively, filing my nails. "You won't get another one." I looked at my hands and quietly replied, "Sometimes that's the main problem." After 2 weeks of silence and tranquility in my home, the version of events my family was telling others began to reach me. In it, I was the ungrateful daughter who had thrown her needy parents out. And Haley was the victim, whose future plans were ruined by her sister's jealousy. One evening, my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, rang my doorbell. She was holding a pie, and her face was filled with sincere concern. "Olivia, dear, how are you?" she asked. "I've heard rumors about what happened." I braced myself. "And what exactly have you heard, Mrs. Gable?" "Well, that you seem to have had some financial difficulties, and that's why your parents had to move out, so as not to be a burden on you." I stared at her silently for a few seconds, then calmly replied, "Mrs. Gable, my finances are fine. And my parents moved out because for 3 years they lived in my house absolutely for free, and I alone bore all the expenses." Her expression slowly changed as she processed my words. "Oh," she finally said. "I was told something completely different." "I don't doubt that for a second," I replied. Their ability to create and control the narrative they wanted was astonishing. 3 years of living at my expense they managed to present as helping their daughter. And my desire to set boundaries turned into an inexplicable offense I had caused them. Their own role in this story was completely erased, as if it had never existed. But fortunately, not everyone fell for their stories. Over the weekend, my best friend, Jessica, called me. Listen, I just ran into your mom at the supermarket, she began. She told me an incredible story about how you supposedly kicked them out of the house because you're jealous of Haley's wedding. And I just can't believe it. You're the most responsive person I know. Apparently, that was my problem. I was too responsive, I sighed. So tell me what really happened, she asked. And I laid it all out for her, without holding anything back, about the years of financial support, the ultimatum, and how my personal boundaries were simply ignored. Olivia, that's terrible, she said after listening to me. Why did you keep silent? I guess I was embarrassed, I admitted. And I kept convincing myself that it was just family difficulties. Olivia, this isn't difficulties, Jessica said firmly. This sounds more like financial abuse. Hearing that from someone on the outside was sobering. I realized that my family wasn't just demanding. Their behavior had crossed all acceptable boundaries. Jessica wasn't the only one who saw the true state of affairs. A couple of days later, my grandfather called me again. I've been thinking a lot since our conversation, he said. And I'm watching how your parents are behaving now. And what do you see? I asked. I see that they don't admit their mistakes. They portray themselves as victims, and you as the one to blame for everything. That's enough to understand on whose side the truth lies. It's still hard for me, Grandpa. I constantly doubt whether I did the right thing. Granddaughter, right decisions are rarely easy, he replied. You just protected yourself. And that's always the right thing to do. His support was priceless, especially when other relatives continued their campaign to make me feel guilty. 3 weeks passed, and another call came from Liam. This time, there was no diplomacy in his voice, only exhaustion. Olivia, your family is still at my place, he said without preamble. They're not even trying to look for a place and are acting as if this is their house. I suppressed a bitter smile. Welcome to my world, Liam. Now I think I understand why you did what you did, he continued. Her father isn't even thinking about looking for a job, her mother criticizes everything in my house, and Haley demands that I pay for her dream wedding. Any attempt to talk about the budget ends with accusations that I don't love her enough. He was on his way to discovering the main family secret. Someone else always had to pay for their dreams. Liam, just out of curiosity, I asked, what has Haley been telling you about her work for the last 3 years? The ensuing pause was eloquent. She said she was helping your parents and was focused on the future, he finally squeezed out. Another long pause on the other end of the line told me that he understood everything. I didn't need to add anything. Listen, Olivia, he said after a long pause. I'm calling for advice. How do I solve this problem without losing Haley? I sighed. I'm afraid you can't have it both ways. What does that mean? He asked. It means that Haley is used to someone always solving her problems. If you become that someone, be prepared to do it for the rest of your life. I love her too, Liam. But love shouldn't be an excuse for irresponsibility. When the conversation ended, I realized something important. For the first time in all this, I didn't feel a single drop of guilt. I felt sorry for Liam, who had gotten into this situation. I felt sorry for my parents, who had brought this upon themselves. I even felt a little sorry for Haley, who had never grown up. But for my decision to protect myself, I wasn't sorry for a single second. My newfound peace lasted exactly 4 days, until my assistant informed me that Haley was waiting for me in the reception area. My sister looked impeccable, dressed to the nines with a perfect manicure, the living embodiment of a success she had never achieved. Despite a bad feeling, I told her to let her in. Haley entered my office with the air of an owner and sank into a chair. Great office, Olivia, she said. I remained silent. Compliments from Haley always came at a price. I came to apologize, she said unexpectedly. I've been thinking a lot and I realized that we probably took advantage of your kindness. The wording, probably took advantage, told me a lot. I want to make things right, Haley continued with a disarming smile. After all, family is more than just money. Liam and I want to have a modest wedding at our own expense. And we'll pay back what you spent on us in installments, as soon as we get back on our feet. The offer was so perfect that I immediately knew it wasn't real. Haley, get to the point, I said. Her mask of impeccability faltered for a moment. There is no point. I just missed my sister. Then why are your eyes darting around as if you're about to make a request? She began to fidget with the handle of her purse, an old habit of hers when she was nervous. The thing is, it's a bit crowded for all of us at Liam's, and the lease agreement doesn't allow guests to stay for long. So we thought. She trailed off. I finished for her. You want to move back in? Only for a while, she blurted out immediately. Until we find our own place. And we'll pay. I swear. I leaned back in my chair, looking at my sister intently. She looked convincing, but Haley had always been a great actress when she needed something. And what amount are you offering? I asked. She beamed, thinking the deal was in the bag. We could pay $900 a month. I mentally crunched the numbers. My mortgage alone was $3,000 a month. $900 wouldn't even cover a third of the real costs, but it was, at least, a concrete offer. And what are the terms of your temporary stay? I asked. No more than 7 months, she promised. Until we get married and move out. And the wedding? We decided to do everything more modestly. I think we can manage with $12,000. $12,000 instead of $30,000. Progress, but still an astronomical sum for someone without a job. Haley, give me one reason why I should believe you. Because I've understood everything, she said with fervor. I've learned my lesson. And what lesson is that? I looked at her intently. She hesitated for a moment. That family is more important than any money. Wrong, I cut her off. The right lesson was that adults are responsible for themselves. But Haley still saw this situation as a conflict between family and money, not a matter of basic respect and personal boundaries. I appreciate you coming, Haley, I replied, choosing my words carefully. But my decision to live alone remains in force. The mask of self-control on her face cracked. Olivia, I'm begging you, her voice trembled. Liam is also asking us to move out. We have absolutely nowhere to go. And your parents? I heard they found a place. They found a tiny studio, she sobbed. There's only room for the two of them. So, my parents had found something within their budget after all. Well, good. Haley, you're 27 years old, I said as gently as possible. You have a degree. You can find a job and rent a place, just like millions of other people do. But everywhere requires experience now, and where would I get it? I wasn't working, I was helping my parents, she retorted. Helping your parents. What a convenient name for 3 years of complete idleness at my expense. You didn't work because you didn't want to, I said bluntly. That's not true. Someone had to take care of them. Take care? I raised an eyebrow. Our parents are perfectly healthy and capable people. Haley opened her mouth but couldn't find a response. The truth was that they didn't need care. They needed the money I was earning while Haley was just enjoying life. Seeing that her arguments weren't working, she changed her tune. Listen, her voice became serious. Liam has started asking awkward questions about money. If I don't solve our problems, he might change his mind about the wedding. And then I understood the real reason for her visit. It wasn't about remorse. It was about the fact that her new source of income was under threat. Perhaps that's for the best, I remarked calmly. Haley's eyes widened. How can you say that? I love him. Are you sure you love him? I asked, and not the idea of a comfortable life where you don't have to work? That's not fair, she whispered. What's not fair, Haley? Besides love, what are you prepared to give Liam in return for full support? The question caught her off guard. I could see her trying to find an answer and failing. I give him my love, she finally said uncertainly. Love alone is not enough for a marriage, I said. You need partnership, responsibility, respect. And you're offering Liam the same thing you offered me, the opportunity to pay your bills in exchange for only a sense of duty and constant requests. Haley jumped up abruptly, her composure gone. You become so callous, Olivia. Money has corrupted you, she threw at me. Not money, I corrected calmly. Healthy boundaries. She ran out of the office in tears, and for a moment I felt the familiar pang of guilt. But now I knew that it was just an echo of the past, an old habit of feeling responsible for others' decisions. In the evening, I called Dr. Evans. I feel a little guilty, but at the same time, I understand everything clearly, I shared. I saw her tricks, but I didn't give in. That is growth, Olivia, she replied. And it's not always pleasant. She looked so lost, I sighed. Haley is indeed lost, Dr. Evans agreed. But it's not your job to save her. That's a job she has to do for herself. I knew she was right. It still hurt me to think that my sister was having a hard time. But now I finally understood the key difference. It's one thing to help, and quite another to enable someone's irresponsibility. In the following weeks, scraps of news reached me through my grandfather. I learned that Haley and Liam had called off their engagement, and my sister had temporarily moved in with a friend. My parents, as it turned out, were also beginning to adapt to their new life. My father had found a part-time job in a home improvement store where his experience was valued, and my mother had taken an interest in data work and was even thinking about taking computer courses. It seemed they were starting to cope. My grandfather also said that family gatherings had become different, quieter and more peaceful. Instead of discussing the latest problems, they had started just talking about life. I wasn't invited to these gatherings, and a part of me was sad about that. But there was another part that was happy. Because I was no longer being asked to pay for these gatherings, solve others' problems, or save someone from the consequences of their choices. I was learning to accept this slight sadness, because the price for it was long-awaited peace. A year after that memorable day, I happened to run into Liam at a coffee shop downtown. He looked completely different, calm and relaxed, in a way I had never seen him next to my sister. He came up to my table. Olivia, hi. How are you? I'm great, Liam. You look good too. He smiled. I feel great. By the way, I've been meaning to thank you for a long time. Thank me? For what? I was surprised. For that conversation we had. It helped me realize a lot, he answered. I realized that I was building a relationship with a person who saw me not as a partner, but as a solution to all her problems. It wouldn't have been a marriage, but a job as a rescuer. And how are you now? I asked. I'm happy, he said simply. I met a girl for whom partnership is about mutual support, not one-sided investments. I was genuinely happy for him. That sounds great, Liam. He was silent for a moment, then added, as if in passing, by the way, I saw on social media that Haley is working now. Looks like she found something permanent, judging by her posts. This news genuinely pleased me. For the first time in a long time, I felt a pang not of resentment, but of simple human curiosity. My hand instinctively reached for my phone, and for the first time in that year, I went to my sister's social media page. What I saw there took me by surprise. The latest photo was of Haley, and she was literally glowing with happiness. Standing next to her was her new boyfriend, hugging her noticeably pregnant belly. He didn't look like a rich heir, simple clothes, a kind, open smile, but the way they looked at each other said a lot. They looked genuinely happy. And at that moment, I realized that I had done everything right. My sister had finally found something that no money could buy, simple human happiness, built not on calculation, but on something real. And she had achieved it herself. On the way home, I reflected on the fact that every choice has its price. My decision to set boundaries had cost me my relationship with my family and the opportunity to watch her new relationship develop and her pregnancy progress. But in return, I received something priceless: financial stability, peace and quiet in my own home, and, most importantly, self-respect that no longer depended on how useful I was to others. Returning to my cozy, quiet home, I made dinner just for myself and put on a movie that I wanted to watch. The phone was silent. No emergency situations, no requests for help, no one else's dreams that needed to be paid for. For the first time in many years, I was living my own life, not for someone else's approval. Yes, sometimes I felt a little lonely. But this loneliness was honest. And it was 1,000 times better than the false closeness I had lived in before.